I like software networks that are worth more than $100 billion that are 50x bigger than their competitor, that are going to eat the world, that 99% of the world doesn't agree with me on. So in fact, I like the fact that people don't understand it, don't agree with it, or are afraid of it, because I couldn't afford to buy it if they all agreed with me.
Really? Can you feel the tension in the air right now? I know I can. I can feel it all the way down in my plums, getting all swollen.
The point is, if you have the superior asset, it's going up forever, Laura. Forever.
Right.
Cause I'm heartless, and I'm back to my ways, cause I'm heartless. All this money and this pain got me heartless. For life, cause I'm heartless. Said I'm heartless, trying to be a better man, but I'm heartless. Never be a wedding plan, but I'm heartless. No life, cause I'm heartless.
105,000 Bitcoin on your balance sheet at MicroStrategies. Is there a target that you have in mind?
No, just buy as many as we can.
Okay.
More is better. Well, a year ago, I told you sell your gold, buy Bitcoin. I don't think I was wrong. Today, I would say sell your altcoins and buy Bitcoin. The conclusion is you should sell the altcoins. Everybody is overestimating the potential of the altcoins, and they're underestimating the potential of Bitcoin.
Cause I'm heartless, and I'm back to my ways, cause I'm heartless. All this money and this pain got me heartless. For life, cause I'm heartless.
Bitcoin is pretty much the most predictable thing in the entire blockchain universe. Everything else is uncertain. There's massive technical uncertainty, security uncertainty, legal uncertainty, execution uncertainty.
What would you do if you had
105,000 Bitcoin?
I'll tell you what I'd do, man. 2 chicks at the same time, man.
Oh my God. I get it.
Hey, Dennis! D! Oh.
Guys, hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, yeah?
Oh, real good. Looking to get into Bitcoin lately. Hey, when do you think the next dip is?
You haven't bought yet?
No, we're gonna wait until it dips to 5K, and then we're all in.
Oh,
Driver, we're done here.
It was a Bitcoiner that I met through like a private one-on-one education session. So I get on a call with this guy the other day. His name is Shane. So the reason I'm so bullish on Shane and so many more like him is he gets chatting with me, he's asking a lot of really good questions that give an indication that he's done his homework and that he's dove down the rabbit hole and he's gotten to a place where he understands, all right, Bitcoin is what makes sense. I don't want any of the riffraff. And he's asking really great questions about things like multi-sig and like proper security and privacy and non-KYC sats and all of these great things, running a node, all of this stuff. And then so it comes around and I'm like, okay, so tell me kind of where you're at, you know, how you got to where you are. So he goes on to tell me that back in he got started in 2020. And he's like, so I started diving into Bitcoin and shitcoins in 2020. So I bought Bitcoin, I got a handful of shitcoins, and then I started reading. And inside of 6 weeks, I realized that everything else was BS. I dumped all my shitcoins and went Bitcoin only, and then started. And so I had not heard kind of that expedited level of settling to Bitcoin only many times previously. And I I had the biggest smile on my face because I realized that the messaging that's being put out there makes sense to newcomers if they come across it. The speed at which somebody can learn and decipher the difference between Bitcoin and everything else, especially the way he was describing it, he was saying, well, I got drawn to Bitcoin because of, the promise of decentralization and all of that. And so that, they have the basic premise because these are the buzzwords that all the shitcoins use as well. And so he gets there based on these promises, and then proceeds to dig into the details based on the conversations and the content put out by people like Carlin Walker, by people like Guy Swan, and the multitude of other great Bitcoiners that are writing and producing and making video content and all of this different stuff. And he got on that path very, very quickly. And so I think in the end, my reason for being bullish centers around that all people really need is quality content to understand what's going on and decipher between the reality and the mirage that is crypto.
It's not that hard to see that this is a $25 to $50 trillion a year problem for anybody with assets on Earth. It's very rare that you find a technology that's the solution to every rich person's problem and every poor person's problem simultaneously.
What if there's a technological advancement so powerful that it transforms the very basic pillars of our society? A technology which fundamentally influences the way that our economy, governance systems, and businesses function, and could change our conceptual understanding of trade, ownership, and trust. This technology already exists, and it's called cryptocurrency. People often think of Bitcoin as only virtual money or a transaction system. But if you look closer, you'll see that the monetary aspect is just the tip of the iceberg. That's because Bitcoin is a groundbreaking internet technology for which money is merely one of the possible applications. Money exists to facilitate trade. Through the centuries, trade has become incredibly complex. Everyone trades with everyone worldwide. Trade is recorded in bookkeeping, and this information is often isolated and closed to the public. For this reason, we use third parties and middlemen we trust to facilitate and approve our transactions. Think of governments, banks, accountants, notaries, and the paper money in your wallet. We call these trusted third parties. This brings us to the essence of Bitcoin. Bitcoin software enables a network of computers to maintain a collective bookkeeping via the internet. This bookkeeping is neither closed nor in control of one party. Rather, it is public and available in one digital ledger which is fully distributed across the network. We call this the blockchain. In the blockchain, all transactions are logged, including information on the time, date, participants, and amount of every single transaction. Each node in the network owns a full copy of the blockchain. On the basis of complicated, state-of-the-art mathematical principles, the transactions are verified by the so-called Bitcoin miners, who maintain the ledger. The mathematical principles also ensure that these nodes automatically and continuously agree about the current state of the ledger and every transaction in it. If anyone attempts to corrupt a transaction, the nodes will not arrive at a consensus, and hence will refuse to incorporate the transaction in the blockchain. So every transaction is public, and thousands of nodes unanimously agree that a transaction has occurred on date X at time Y. It's almost like there's a notary present at every transaction. This way, everyone has access to a shared single source of truth. This is why we can always trust the blockchain. The ledger doesn't care whether a Bitcoin represents a certain amount of euros or dollars, or anything else of value, or property for that matter. Users can decide for themselves what a unit of Bitcoin represents. A Bitcoin is divisible in 100 million units, and each unit is both individually identifiable and programmable. This means that users can assign properties to each unit. Users can program a unit to represent a eurocent, or a share in a company, a kilowatt-hour of energy, or a digital certificate of ownership. Because of this, Bitcoin is much more than simply money and payments. A Bitcoin can represent many kinds of property: 1,000 barrels of oil, award credits, or a vote during elections, for example. Moreover, Bitcoin allows us to make our currency smarter and to automize our cash and money flows. Imagine a healthcare allowance in dollars or euros that can only be used to pay for healthcare at certified parties. In this case, whether someone actually follows the rules is no longer verified in the bureaucratic process afterwards. You simply program these rules into the money. Ergo, compliancy up front. The unit can even be programmed in such a way that it will automatically return to the provider if the receiver doesn't use it after a certain amount of time. This way, the provider can ensure that allowances are not hoarded. A company can control its spending in the same way, by programming budgets for salaries, machinery, materials, and maintenance so that the respective money is specified and cannot be spent on other things. Automizing such matters leads to a considerable decrease in bureaucracy, which saves accountants, controllers, and the organization in general an incredible amount of time. The programmable open character of Bitcoin allows us to completely rebuild and innovate our financial sector and our administrative processes, make them more efficient and transparent, and significantly decrease bureaucracy. But there's more. In an Internet of Things, our economy will be dealing with machines that actively participate in the economic traffic. In fact, they're already here. Think of a vending machine, or drones delivering packages. These machines are unfamiliar with the concept of trust, but Bitcoin is not. Because of Bitcoin, the drone can be 100% certain that it will deliver the package to the right recipient and know for sure that it's been paid for. And we can program the vending machine in such a way that it will automatically keep track of its supplies, order new supplies from the supplier, and pay for them automatically. Of course, you'll understand that this is only the beginning. Internet technology is disruptive and breaks the status quo. It opens markets and breaks the positions of middlemen all the time. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have caused a paradigm shift. It's time to explore this new technology constructively and critically, and openly discuss potential applications.
So I'm a Bank of America and everybody's missing money. I'm also missing money over $1,300 and they're telling me to call customer service. And they keep hanging up on people. This another person here is also missing money. So we're trying to see what's going on. Money's missing today and we need our money. And they're already telling us to call customer service. And customer service ain't doing nothing about it. So just a heads up, if anybody's experiencing this, please let us know because this is not right. I'm missing $1,400 from my account. And they're telling me that there's no way they can help us. This guy's missing money too. This other person is missing money too. And you missing money too? There you go. So this is not something that's just one person. This is everybody's happening to them. And this is crazy. This is very crazy. Yes, Bank of America decided to take people's money without their consent. And we're asking what's going on and they're giving us a runaround. Everybody for the same thing, man. Same thing.
This is the Jade hardware device. The Jade features a 1.14-inch IPS LCD display. On the inside, you're going to have a 240 milliamp hour battery. On the side, you're going to have a click wheel. This allows you to go back and forth and also allows you to click. On the bottom, you're going to have a USB-C port. This allows you to charge the device while also allowing you to connect to computers. On the back, you're going to have a camera. As of recording this video, the camera does not work, but a future upgrade is coming, which will allow for the camera to work, which will then allow you to do air gap transactions using the Jade, which is a feature that I personally am really looking forward to. And then lastly, on the side, you're going to have a power button. If you hold that power button down for a couple seconds, you will notice that the screen turns on and a new window pops up, and this window is asking us to go to the Blockstream website to follow the instruction guide that is given there.
What is it doing to the dollar? The dollar is at multi-decade highs, absolutely raging versus every other currency. So what death of the dollar? This is the most ridiculous claim that I hear, is that we're in for the death of the dollar. Versus what? The dollar is at 20-year highs versus every other currency. Bitcoin is really the only thing that if you take it back over a long enough time horizon that it's actually outperforming the dollar. But over the last 5 years, Bitcoin is actually flat versus the dollar. What death of the dollar?
You gave a D- to The Economist. So are they too, like the politicians, a wash in terms of there's good ideas and bad ideas, and that tiny delta between good and bad is how you squeak past the F plus onto the D- territory?
I think most economic ideas are bad ideas. Like
most.
Take us back to MIT, and you want to solve a fluid dynamics problem. Like design the shape of the hull of that ship, or you want to design an airfoil, a wing, or if you want to design an engine or a nozzle in a rocket ship, you wouldn't do it with simple arithmetic. You wouldn't do it with a scalar. There's not a single number, right? It's vector math. Computational fluid dynamics is n-dimensional, higher level math, complicated stuff. So when an economist says the inflation rate is 2%, that's a scalar. And when an economist says it's not a problem to print more money because the velocity of the money is very low, the monetary velocity is low, that's another scalar. Okay, so the truth of the matter is inflation is not a scalar. Inflation is an n-dimensional vector. Money velocity is not a scalar. Saying what's the velocity of money? Oh, it's slow or it's fast. It ignores the question of what medium is the money moving through. In the same way that, what's the speed of sound? Okay, well, what is sound, right? Sound is a compression wave. It's energy moving through a medium, but the speed is different. So, for example, the speed of sound through air is different than the speed of sound through water. And sound moves faster through water. It moves faster through a solid, and it moves faster through a stiffer solid. So there isn't one.
What is the fundamental problem with the way economists reduce the world down to a model? Is it too simple, or is it just even the first principles of constructing the model is wrong?
I think that the fundamental problem is if you see the world as a scalar, you simply pick the one number which supports whatever you want to do, and you ignore the universe of other consequences from your behavior.
In general, I don't know if you've heard of Eric Watson has been talking about this with gauge theory. So different kinds of approaches from the physics world, from the mathematical world, to extend past this scalar view of economics. So gauge theory is one way that comes from physics. Do you find that way of exploring economics interesting? So outside of cryptocurrency, outside of the actual technologies and so on, just analysis of how economics works. Do you find that interesting?
Yeah, I think that if we're going to want to really make any scientific progress in economics, we have to apply much more computationally intensive and richer forms of mathematics.
So simulation, perhaps, or?
Yeah, when I was at MIT, I studied system dynamics. They taught it at the Sloan School. It was developed by Jay Forrester, who was an extraordinary computer scientist. And when we created models of economic behavior, they were all multidimensional, nonlinear models. So if you want to describe how anything works in the real world, you have to start with the concept of feedback. If I double the price of something, demand will fall, and attempts to create supply will increase, and there will be a delay before the capacity increases. There'll be an instant demand change, and there'll be rippling effects throughout every other segment of the economy, downstream and upstream of such a thing. So it's kind of common sense, but most economics, most classical economics, it's always, taught with linear models, fairly simplistic linear models. And oftentimes, even I'm really shocked today that the entire mainstream dialogue of economics has been captured by scalar arithmetic. For example, if you read read any article in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, right? They just refer to there's an inflation number, or the CPI, or the inflation rate is X. And if you look at all the historic studies of the impact of inflation, generally they're all based upon the idea that inflation equals CPI, and then they try to extrapolate from that, and you just get nowhere with it.
So at the very least, we should be considering inflation and other economics concepts as a nonlinear dynamical system. So nonlinearity, and also just embracing the full complexity of just how the variables interact, maybe through simulation, maybe have some interesting models around that.
Wouldn't it be refreshing if somebody for once published a table of the change in price of every product, every service, and every asset in every place over time?
This is the first bear market where there is zero doubt about the direction that central banks are going as far as debasement and printing. And to your point about whether or not they'll have to pivot in Q1 or Q2, I don't know a ton about this, but I know that the bond market is pricing in basically a Q1 either freeze or cut in America, which is sort of the stalwart central bank as far as the lighthouse that our central banks are looking at. And we'll talk a bit about Europe when it comes to my topic. But I think about all these things, and I think about the nature of the bear market in 2017, 18, and just how, that bear market, you never know what causes these things, but there's at least some potential that the catalyst for that drop was the Coinbase Bcash Ninja launch. Like that's a different environment than we're in now. And, I'll talk about that a bit later as well, but I would just say to people who are worried about volatility, being worried about volatility is fine. I understand that people are risk averse. There's many studies that show that humans and other species are much more likely to protect what they have than they are to leave what they have and pursue something new or interesting. We've talked about that with Ben's topic. We're talking about it now with Mark's. It's not new or news to anyone, but I would just note that soon, I think, Mark, to your point, there will not be a choice. But it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And positioning yourself early is important, and being able to weather these things in the meantime is important. But I really think we're going to be rewarded long term for our conviction.
This is Matthew Cratter from Bitcoin University, and today I want to talk about BRICS, the BRICS countries, de-dollarization, and Bitcoin. These are some questions I've been getting over the past few weeks. And I'm going to start with de-dollarization. This is just another word for the world slowly moving away from the US dollar as both a global reserve currency. In other words, the US dollar is widely used for global trade in goods and services and commodities, as well as the US dollar being a global reserve asset. And what we mean by this is that US treasuries are held by global central banks, by governments, as a way of settling trade surpluses and as a sort of a store of value, though U.S. treasuries have not been a great store of value. In the mid-1970s, there was this agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia in which the U.S. agreed to protect and sell arms to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia agreed in exchange to sell their oil denominated only in US dollars. So if you're a country like Japan or Lebanon traditionally that doesn't produce any crude oil, you need to buy US dollars first in order to buy crude oil, or at least this is how it used to work. And this created global demand for US dollars and treasuries and led to all global commodity trade, not just crude oil, being priced in US dollars. So this was a huge boon for the US dollar. This was also the primary tool used by the US government to create demand for the US dollar after the US left the gold standard in 1971. And it was sort of, everything was up in the air about whether the US dollar could still hold value. So what we're witnessing now in the 2020s is the breakdown of this global US dollar system. US foreign policy itself over the past couple of years has helped to accelerate this de-dollarization. When the US government froze Russia's US dollars holdings in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, this has definitely gotten the attention of China, which has been slowly selling off its US treasuries over the past few years. So if you are, or if you think you could become, and basically every country on earth, it seems like at some point has been an enemy of the US, if you think you could become an enemy of the US, why would you hold US dollars or US treasuries? Because US dollars are not censorship resistant and seizure resistant like Bitcoin is. If you're enjoying this video so far, I just ask you to hit that subscribe and like buttons. So as we said, we're beginning to see more and more global trade seek to bypass using the US dollar. We have this recent agreement between China and Brazil to do trade in the Chinese currency in renminbi, as well as this agreement that India made with Russia to buy crude oil from Russia and pay them using Russian rubles. So they're really going against the US by doing this. Now the term BRIC or BRICS, this was coined by the Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in the early 2000s. And BRIC itself stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China. They later added South Africa, which is the S, and now they've been adding a bunch of countries, Saudi Arabia, obviously, possibly Mexico, etc. All these countries that want to move away from the dollar. So we could call it BRICS Plus. That's sometimes how you see it. Here's an old article from June of 2022. BRICS, the new name in reserve currencies, raising some eyebrows today has been an address by President Putin outlining that Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are developing a new basket-based reserve currency. The presumption is that it will comprise real rubles, rupees, renminbi, and rand, and present an alternative to the IMF's special drawing rights. So here's the question. This has been in the news for over a year now. Should the BRICS get together and create a new reserve currency? Is this what they're doing that's backed by a basket of their 5 currencies? And I would say no, not if the past is prologue to the future. If we take a look at how each of these currencies has performed relative to the dollar over the past 15 or so years, this is the Brazilian real against the US dollar. If the chart's moving down, that means the US dollar is strengthening against whatever currency it is, in this case the real. This has been basically straight down since 2012. Same goes for the ruble, the Russian ruble against the US dollar. Here's the Indian rupee against the US dollar. Here's the South African rand against the US dollar. And we can see the US dollar is not just strengthened over the last couple of years when the Fed has been raising rates, but it's also strengthened massively against these BRICS currencies, these BRICS fiat currencies over the past 10, 15 years. The one exception is the Chinese yuan, the renminbi, and we can see it peaked in 2013 or so. It's still up from 2008. So this is the one real wild card. The strange thing about the yuan, though, is it's a highly managed currency, and the exchange rate is really set by the Chinese government, by the CCP, and it's not convertible is the other thing. So it's very difficult to convert it to other currencies without the Chinese government's permission. So the question then, looking at all these charts, is why would you ever want to hold a basket of this stuff? Even people in these countries themselves don't want to hold these currencies. So in Brazil, for example, if you have some real, you probably try to convert them to dollars as a way of saving them or holding value, or you just immediately buy a moped or a motorcycle with it. You try to get out of the currency because it's such a weak currency. So even people in these BRICS countries themselves don't want to hold these currencies, but they try to trade them for real goods and services, for US dollars, for gold, or for Bitcoin. Then there's this very interesting article that many of you sent me when I was out of town about the BRICS nations developing a new currency. This is from April 6th. This is from the website Zero Hedge. And here's the relevant part. State Duma Deputy Chairman Alexander Babakov said that the transition to settlements in national currencies is the first step. We've already seen this occur with recent oil deals between India and Russia being settled in currencies other than dollars, as we just talked about, being settled in rubles and possibly rupees as well. The next one, this is Babakov speaking, the next one is to provide the circulation of digital or any other form of a fundamentally new currency in the nearest future. There's a little problem with the translation. I think that at the BRICS Leaders Summit, the readiness to realize this project will be announced. Such works are underway. That summit is scheduled for August 2023. Babakov said that the BRICS nations are developing a strategy that does not defend the dollar or euro. Obviously, Russia not happy with all the sanctions that have been put on it by the US and its European allies. And Babakov went on to say that a quote-unquote single currency would likely emerge within BRICS, pegged to gold or other groups of products, rare earth elements, or soil. So this would be more of a commodity-backed BRICS currency, and it might look very different from something like this. If you're just doing a basket of the fiat currencies, that's one thing. But if it's backed by gold or something, or some other commodity, that gets a little more interesting. As we can see in this article, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa account for about 40% of the global population and a quarter of the global GDP. So it is a significant coalition of countries. So let's talk about a BRICS commodity-backed currency. There are many problems with this. It sounds good theoretically, but they're very practical problems. For example, in which countries will the commodities that back the currency be held? If it's backed by gold, who's going to hold the gold? Will it be equally distributed? Will China hold extra gold? Will Russia hold extra gold? Then what happens if that country turns rogue or gets invaded, the country that's holding all the backings to this currency? Who will be in charge of the supply audits of the commodities that back the currency? This was, of course, the problem at Fort Knox and the problem with the U.S. being on a gold standard. People never really knew whether the gold was there or whether it had been sold off. And the U.S. definitely let its money supply in the 60s and early 70s get ahead of the amount of gold that was backing it. So people always cheat on a gold standard. It failed once in 1971, and I think it would be foolish to go back to it. But here's the question: who will be in charge of the supply audits if they were to do this? Would you let Russia be in charge? Would you let China? Are you willing to trust the auditor that the currency is fully backed by the commodities that they say that they are? This is always the problem with currencies that are backed by something else. And this is one thing that makes Bitcoin so special, is that it's not backed by something, it's backed by itself. If you have something that is backed by something, what I call something backed tokens here, they always have to rely on a trusted third party to store and custody the underlying asset, as well as facilitate redemptions. This itself is a huge attack vector. If you want to attack the token, you need only attack the custodian or other centralized third party. We've already spoken about the failure of the gold standard and Nixon. If you own a something-backed token, you need to trust the issuer to keep its promises, unlike the US did to France in the 1960s and early 70s. You also need to trust that the issuer itself will not be pressured by a stronger outside party to do the same thing. And I go on to conclude, I'll link to this video in the description notes below, I go on to conclude, trust, trust, trust. Why in the world would we ever want to reinvent this kind of system that has failed again and again? This is the problem with backing your currency with something else that has to be stored in a warehouse, for example. You can say that Bitcoin is backed by energy, but you mean something very different from that. You mean that energy provides, there's a certain security budget, etc., but there's not something backing Bitcoin that's held in warehouses. Now, it's quite likely that any BRICS currency ends up being controlled by its most powerful member, China. So if you join the BRICS coalition, you're really getting in bed with China, and you better hope that they will have your best interests in mind as well. Is a BRICS coin, as I'll call it, a currency that you would personally, you the listener, would personally want to hold in place of the US dollar? US dollar is definitely a ship coin. BRICS coin would probably be just another worse fiat ship coin. If it's backed by a commodity, that's something different. It would be very difficult to accumulate enough commodities to back it and enough gold, and then thered be the trust problem as well. The other thing is overcoming the US dollar's network effects is not something that happens overnight. And the thing about BRICS coin would be an odd ragtag alliance between a bunch of countries that don't really like each other or have much in common culturally with each other, apart from their desire not to have to deal with the US and the US dollar anymore. Here's another big problem. What is the place of the renminbi, the Chinese yuan, in all of this? Renminbi is not freely convertible, as we mentioned earlier in this video, and still being manipulated by the CCP in the FX markets, the exchange rate is. renminbi can never be a global reserve currency itself as long as it remains unconvertible. And the reason it remains unconvertible is the CCP is worried about huge capital flight out of the country if they ever allow it to trade freely and become fully convertible. If the renminbi is not convertible, how does it fit into a basket of currencies or commodity-backed currencies like a BRICS coin? These are all questions that need to be answered. There was this article from 2019, BRICS nations propose cryptocurrency for payment settlement system. This may still be in the works. There's rumors of this. The problem with this is it's very difficult to invent a new crypto and get people to use it. Will this new crypto be proof of work or proof of stake? Who's going to build it? Who are the miners and validators going to be? Is it really going to be centrally controlled? Or how are you going to achieve greater decentralization in a short period of time? How will they ensure that no member party can game it? How can you ensure that the Russians don't game it, or the Chinese don't game it, or the Indians don't game it, etc.? It might make a lot more sense for these countries to just use Bitcoin instead if they want to use it for settlement or store value. They're already using gold to settle some trade, but gold is bulky and expensive to transport. It's easy to capture. It's much more difficult to move around and hide than Bitcoin is. Bitcoin as digital gold is really the next logical step. So what are my predictions about BRICS and the BRICS coin? I predict BRICS coin never really gets off the ground or achieves widespread adoption. They may launch something this summer, but I think it'll be very difficult for it to achieve widespread adoption. I think we continue to see more non-US dollar denominated trade between these countries, trade in commodities, goods, and services, where they're not using US dollars, where, for example, the Chinese are using renminbi to buy crude oil from Russia, and then Russia spends those renminbi back into the Chinese economy for goods and services. You can see something like this, but I don't think that we really see a serious rival to the US dollar or to the euro. It's very difficult because of network effects to create your own currency. I do think the US dollar continues to kill off weaker fiats, and so we see something similar happening with these charts where the US dollar continues to appreciate. Certainly has killed off things like the Lebanese pound, for example. US dollar continues to lose value, though. It appreciates against weaker fiat currencies, but itself continues to lose value against real things like goods and services and Bitcoin. Ultimately, I think de-dollarization really is just the world slowly adopting Bitcoin, and this is how it happens. Not moving to a BRICS currency that's backed by trust, but moving to a new digital neutral currency, digital gold, which is what Bitcoin is. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.